Welcome back, everybody. This is Rodrigo Fondor with the Asheville Real Estate News. Really excited to have the mayor joining us today. Mayor, welcome.
Thank you.
And today we're going to be talking about real estate. At the city council retreat, when you guys were talking about this moving into this year, is there anything new that came out, or is it kind of just taking that same, what you just shared and keep improving on it and building on it?
I think in terms of housing, it was just sort of a continuation of the initiatives we have already.
So another popular topic, obviously, in town right now is the short-term rentals. And as recently in January, short-term rentals, got banned from the downtown area.
Short-term rentals has been a really interesting topic for me to explore. I mean, I am a land use attorney. I do real estate litigation, so this is kind of my area. But when I was first elected in 2009, we weren't talking about short-term rentals. That wasn't a thing.
That's when I first. Welcome back, everybody. This is Rodrigo Fondor with the Asheville Real Estate News. Really excited to have the mayor joining us today. Mayor, welcome.
Thank you.
And today we're going to be talking about real estate. And I know you all just got out of your city council retreat earlier this month. So an appropriate time to kind of see what your all's positions are on a couple of things moving forward and talking about the hot topics, affordable housing and short-term rentals. I think it'd be one thing that I've been personally curious about. I think it's a lot of people might have the same question is when we are talking about affordable housing, what's the balance between the city and then the private sector doing their part to either independently or collectively, kind of put that moving forward as far as some solutions?
Well, let me just say that the affordable housing toolbox, if you will, for cities has grown in the last several years. There's an affordable housing crisis nationwide, so a lot of different cities are trying a lot of different ideas, and so we're all sort of researching what each other is doing and what we can do here locally. So, I think in Asheville it started out with an affordable housing trust fund, which is a fund the city maintains that can make grants to either nonprofits or for-profit developers who build affordable housing, and we have a method for ensuring that the housing remains at an affordable rate for a negotiated period of time. And now we're looking at all different kinds of ideas in the toolbox. We're looking at land trusts. We're trying to leverage city-owned land into affordable housing through public-private partnerships. There's a lot of different ideas out there, but another whole piece of it is through zoning regulations, negotiating with private developers who have decided to come build in Asheville, whether or not they can incorporate some affordable housing into their project. And the leverage the city has in that negotiation is that many of these projects have to come to city council for approval. So it gives us an opportunity to
make sure they fit the criteria.
Yeah, and to negotiate on a case-by-case basis what that developer is going to do their part to help the city and its people with the crisis we're having.
On that note, is there like a specific project or proposal that's on the table right now that you're personally excited about from the city standpoint?
There are a number of them. So we have a number of private projects that have come to council for approval where we've negotiated either affordable units in that project, or that developer makes a contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. But on the city's front, we have just finished the contract on our first public-private partnership where a developer is going to build on city-owned land, affordable housing. It'll be apartments that have to remain affordable for 50 years.
Wow, that's exciting.
Right, it is. The voters passed a $25 million affordable housing bond, so we're using those funds to do a bunch of different things, but one of them is an exploration of 3 city-owned parcels to see which one is a good candidate for our next housing development.
And these are new builds, or are you repurposing old buildings or adding on to the old buildings?
In all the cases I just mentioned, it's land that is vacant, or it may have structure on it, but it can't be used for housing.
It's torn down and then rebuilt.
Right,
okay.
That's right.
Very cool. And at the city council retreat, when you guys were talking about this moving into this year, is there anything new that came out, or is it kind of just taking that same, what you've just shared and keep improving on it and building on it?
I think in terms of housing, it was just sort of a continuation of the initiatives we have already, but then trying to grow new initiatives. So land banking is a relatively new concept for the city, and so we're trying to explore that opportunity. Right. We have had an interesting discussion around home ownership versus rental housing. So we have some folks on council that feel strongly about making sure home ownership is a piece of the affordable housing equation. And because a lot of the developers are building rental units.
We have on the investor side, there's always a lot of conversation about that, whether it's better to rent or buy from a personal monetary perspective. Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I think it's a lot of people's dream to own a home ultimately, or it has been historically, traditionally. Right. That's a big part of being an American, right? But we are seeing a change in the millennial population. There's not as great an interest in owning a home. It's more about place and living in an urban setting where things are walkable, bikeable, that you have a lot of cross-pollination with other people, opportunities to engage with other people, and whether or not you own or rent may be sort of secondary to that experience.
Yeah, so I fall into that category personally. I'm kind of almost anti-home ownership until later in life, per se. So it's definitely interesing to see how those pieces.
When's later in life? How old are you?
So I'm 27, 28 actually as of today, and so.
Happy birthday!
Yeah, thank you. Right. Kind of a special memento. So, so I don't know exactly when that looks. My biggest thing is always from like a pure numbers perspective. I think it's hard to justify home ownership because of the hidden costs that sometimes are forgotten, but. If there's a really strong emotional reason, then I think that's where it kind of outweighs everything else.
Well, and we could go on and on about this, but our tax structure incentivizes home ownership because of the you can take off the interest on your mortgage, and and also it's sort of a forced way to build wealth. Some people say, well, you can save on your own. Well, do a lot of people save on their own? Not as many people. So. But then we saw with the recession that a lot of people lost. They ended up upside down on their homes, and that's not such a big problem in this area, but for people across the country, it turned out to be a bad investment. Yeah,
it's one of those things. It's you just have to be careful, make sure you're making an educated decision, not just doing it because you think that's the next step.
Right.
So another popular topic, obviously, in town right now is the short-term rentals. I know, when we first met to do this, it was at the CREO, which is the Carolina Real Estate Investors Association. And short-term rentals has a lot of people within that organization and the investor community that support it, and then also that are kind of, weary of it. That position, I know, has kind of evolved over the last years, maybe 2 years roughly, give or take, when it really became a hot issue. And as recently in January, short-term rentals, got banned from the downtown area, if that would be the appropriate wording. But what is there, was there a specific reason from, creating a commercial zone that didn't want to have it used for short-term, or just short-term didn't fall into that definition?
Short-term rentals has been a really interesting topic for me to explore. I mean, I am a land use attorney. I do real estate litigation, so this is kind of my area. But when I was first elected in 2009, we weren't talking about short-term rentals. That wasn't a thing.
That's when I first moved here. So
right. So it's really evolved over time, and we've had a number of hearings. And I tell people who are starting to get into this, there are a lot of topics that a city council takes on where we make some change and we're done,
right? And
we don't revisit our zoning code, or we don't tweak it or redo it again. Maybe it'll happen in 20 years. This is one of these topics that is quickly evolving, and we have had to make many changes. We've had a task force explore it. But really, in Asheville, what it comes down to is this. We have neighborhood groups that are completely opposed to short-term rentals. They don't want the integrity of their neighborhood to be disrupted by having somebody different stay next door to them every weekend. Mm-hmm. So they're very vocal and they're very opposed to short-term rentals. We have affordable housing advocates that are opposed to short-term rentals because they see that short-term rentals erode the long-term rental market. Mm-hmm. And we already have the tightest rental market in the state of North Carolina right here in Asheville. So they feel like there's just no room to budge there, and that's a problem. And I think on the flip side, we have people that live here in Asheville and say, if you let me do short-term rentals, then Asheville is affordable for me. This is an affordability issue for me. Right. And it's hard to...
It's a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, right? It's a lot of moving pieces. And it's kind of hard to figure out how many people are in this category of needing to make Asheville affordable for themselves through some short-term rental opportunity versus commercial investors that are actually coming in and buying up houses and turning them into short-term rentals. So we have this compromise right now in Asheville where you can do what's called a homestay and you can rent up to 2 bedrooms in your home. But we made this further change to ban whole house or whole unit, could be a condo, could be an apartment, short-term rentals throughout the city, which includes commercial areas. And now if somebody wants to do a whole house or a whole unit short-term rental, they have to make application to the city council. Each individual application.
So since that has gone into effect in January, have you had any applications yet?
Not yet. Okay. Not yet.
Do you foresee any, or is it just kind of set up where you think a lot of people are just kind of like, whoa, let's see what happens and kind of take it all in?
I've heard a few rumblings of people that might want to try it, and they'll give me a call and say, do you think this is worth the effort? Do you think I stand a chance? And I encourage everyone to go look at all the old YouTube videos of city council so they can get a feel for the discussion on council. Yeah. But, we're not, the tide has turned. I feel that politically the majority of Asheville wants us to tighten up the rules on short-term rentals.
Okay. So I was, before we sat down, I was kind of looking at, see you were not originally from Asheville, is that correct? Mm-hmm. And kind of interested to see what your story is from how you ended up in Asheville and then what spurred you to get into politics and kind of, obviously your second term now, right?
Second term as mayor. Right.
So
third term on council.
And so what happened, or have you always been interested in local politics or politics at a scale?
Well, so first of all, I was born in Denmark and I lived in California and Washington State as a kid. I lived in Olympia, Washington, and Santa Cruz and San Diego. And my family moved to Washington, D.C. when I was in high school. And before I finished high school, my dad got a job at UNC Asheville. Okay. He was the director for what was then called the Center for Creative Retirement. And now it's Osher, Ollie Lifelong Learning Center. So when the summer I turned 17, we moved here.
And you're like, wow.
Yeah. Well, I was concerned because I was, very hip, urban teenager.
Gotcha.
And I was going to have to move to a small town in the South, which I assumed was not going to be a hip urban scene. But it turned out I really liked it a lot. I did go away to college. I went to Boulder and other places. I studied abroad, did different things. And I came back here in 1993, the summer of 1993, having graduated. And I lived in Asheville for a year. And during that year, I worked for Meals on Wheels of Buncombe County as their volunteer coordinator. And I began really learning more about Asheville. That, I'd only lived here for my senior year of high school and summers and things like that. But I used to run the routes for all of my volunteers who canceled. Right. And I ended up delivering meals to homes to people in all of our public housing neighborhoods in Asheville. And I mean, as a 22-year-old, for me, that was pretty eye-opening. I had not really seen all the different sides of Asheville yet. And, it wasn't as if I declared at that moment I was going to run for office and there was going to be a thing. It was more that I was just observing and noticing. And I had, by that point, taken some classes in local government. Okay. And I hadn't understood exactly what local government versus state government versus federal government does until that point. And so I was sort of putting it together, and then I went to Chapel Hill for graduate school, and I got a master's in public administration, which is the degree you get if you want to be a city manager. And I went to law school, and then I went to work at the legislature, and I staffed a local government committee. I was an attorney in the legislature, and just sort of
the more you got involved, you were like, "This is a good fit."
And I started working with elected officials, and I thought, well, at first I thought I certainly couldn't do that job. You had to be somebody extra special to be an elected official. But then I quickly learned that was not the case. So, so we came back to Asheville after the birth of our first son in 2002, and now we have 3 boys. I'm married to a teacher and a coach at Inca High School. And I just started getting involved in my community. I was on the board for my Jewish Community Center. I became the president there. I applied to be on the Board of Adjustment, which is a great board for any realtor. And I liked being involved. That's just kind of a passion of mine. And
every time you tried something new in that arena, you're like, okay, what's the next step? And just keep going.
I mean, I always tell people, you should figure out what you're passionate about and then figure out how to do that thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing.
It's been my experience. It's like always figuring it out little by little.
Right.
Great. Well, do we have any questions so far? We'll open it up to questions from. Feel free to chime in if anybody has any. I did have a couple of others though.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Do this at the end.
So obviously, I'm on the investor side of things. Everything has to do with real estate here. And do you have, obviously you've been in real estate from the legal side of things, and now from the public, running from the city and whatnot. Have you had any experience working with investors? And do you feel like a lot of times we get a bad rep for being the cause of some of the housing issues here in the area? And I don't know what your personal opinion on that is, or how you've seen all those things correlate.
Well, I will say I have seen a change in Asheville, and that is that developers who are trying to develop in Asheville now have sort of tuned in to what the conversation is in Asheville. You cannot show up in Asheville and want to undertake major projects and not be aware of the conversations we're having here around.
It's loud.
Right. I mean, housing prices, people feeling squeezed, and they have to have a certain level of understanding and sensitivity to that discussion and be willing to participate. I have appreciated that they take time to learn about what's going on here. I will say most of the developers that contact me, and pretty much every single one that's going to come before city council does contact me, and usually the other city council members as well. They're coming from Charlotte, Columbia, South Carolina, Greenville, Charleston, some Greensboro, Raleigh. So they're sort of already familiar with Asheville, but they will spend some time noting the differences between these other places where they have developed and Asheville. And I'm very unapologetic about that.
Yeah.
That's just part of how this is working here. And my message to them is, if you want to do business here, it's very important that you understand where the concerns are for this community and how you're going to be a positive participant in that. And we're lucky. We have a lot of leverage right now because it's a hot area to work in. And, my message is, if it doesn't work for you, go.
There's plenty of other places.
There's plenty of other places for you to take your investment dollars. So, I think, from my perspective, I think there probably are some folks that don't even want to give it a try and just don't show up here. But
and what about the small time people who aren't the big developers? The person who has 2 or 3 rental houses, or flips 2 to 3 houses a year type of thing. What space do they fill, do you think?
There is a lot of that going on. I live in a home built by JAG Construction, which is a local construction company. They build homes on a case-by-case basis. They have some smaller projects that they're doing. And I think for that's sorely needed as well in this community. And for them, they don't have to come to city council. So for them, it's all about the permitting process and what's their experience and how expensive is land and what are the zoning regulations so that they can build on different sized lots. Everything in Asheville is not cookie cutter. So it's like every
Feels
lot
like it rarely is. Yeah.
right. Every piece of real estate presents its own unique
Mm-hmm.
challenges. So we've done a lot of work actually to try to streamline that process for those kinds of folks so that their permitting process is smooth. And we've really tried to engage that community so that we're providing an opportunity for local contractors to get in the biz, so to speak.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of people I've spoken to have been very happy with the density reduction that's occurred from our side of things, which is October and November of last
when we did that, right?
I forget exactly. So, do we have any questions?
Are you done with yours?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we should ask everyone for questions because there's a few people tuning in, but Reed wanted to know what local real estate investors could do to help you and the city council and everyone like that.
Well, I mean, I will say we have done, we have made several zoning changes like you're talking about to encourage density. And when that happens, there is some tension with neighborhood organizations who, frankly, are pushing back against growth within their neighborhood, a lot of the infill developments. And I think it's important for us to have a balanced conversation about that. So, we might only have one side show up to a city council meeting to speak in opposition to it. So from my perspective, the more people that can participate in these conversations, the better. It's very interesting to me and ironic that you can have, 100% agreement that we have an affordable housing crisis and that we need to address it in every way. But then when it comes down to different elements of how you address it, you'll get pushback from different groups.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you would say one of the biggest things any group could do, whatever their opinion, just show up and be vocal.
Show up, and education and conversation. I mean, there are different opportunities to hear speakers and workshops around these issues. Yeah. And more people need to connect the dots and have these conversations. I mean, when we changed the accessory dwelling unit regulations to allow for larger accessory dwelling units and for more lots that would be eligible to have them, it was a little bit of a knockdown, drag out, tough conversation. It felt tougher than it needed to be, given what the goal was.
So looking back on that, have you felt that now that people maybe understood it or had an opportunity to put into practice, people are thankful or appreciative of the...
Yes. Okay. I will say this. The people of Asheville have done a great job of getting pretty educated about affordable housing issues. Right. And they, so for example, when I first got elected, Mountain Housing Opportunities, which is one of our nonprofits that builds affordable housing, was proposing the Larchmont project, which is on Merriman Avenue up behind the post office. And the neighborhood, which my mom lives in, right behind there, was incredibly divided. They felt like the people that were opposed to it thought it was going to be housing
detrimental to everything.
Right. It would bring down their housing values. It would allow people to live there that might not be desirable to live next door to, quite frankly. I mean, there were a lot of interesting concerns. And since that time, and since that project went great and it's fabulous, since that time, I really don't hear a lot of the, I don't want affordable housing located next to me because I think it's going to be bad for my property values or it's going to be bad for my neighborhood. I don't hear that as much anymore in Asheville because people have really gotten smart about it.
You got the proof of concept there too, right? So.
Right.
Awesome. Nolan, any other questions?
John wants to know where he can find the exact wording of the new regulation for the STRs in downtown Asheville.
Well, if you go on the Asheville City Council or the Asheville government website and it has a search bar and you can just search short-term rental, you should be able to get some information about it.
If you're watching this, we'll try to find the link and we'll post it a little bit later today or tomorrow as well. And for the podcast.
Okay,
cool.
Does anyone else have any other questions or anything that they have?
If not, while we wait for a question, is there anything outside of the scope of your normal mayoral duties that is an interesting thing that somebody would be worth knowing about you or something that you're like, hey, I wish more people asked me this. So this is kind of an interesting tidbit.
Outside of being mayor?
Because, of course, it gives you so much time to do other things.
No, I don't know. Is there something you think would be?
Well, I just noticed, you had a longboard on your, so I was like, or anything like that. Maybe catch people off guard.
I'm not a longboarder, but I am a big exerciser.
Okay. Fair enough. Great. All right. Well, if we have no more questions, y'all, we'll be putting this up as on the podcast as well. So probably, I think we're 2-3 weeks out. It'll be on wherever you get your podcasts. And Mary, thank you once again so much for the opportunity and for sitting down and educating us.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Appreciate it. Thank you all.